This episode of the Duke Basketball Report podcast is brought to you by the fine boys at Bird Campbell, your Duke-centric law firm with offices in Texas and Florida. Reach out to them at birdcampbell.com. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and all those other things, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 139 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. I am Jason Evans. I will be hosting this week as the Blue Devils have a quiet week after a very busy one last week, and we're going to get into all the stuff that happened there. But first, let me bring in my compadres, my partners in crime. First of all, Sam Klein was in Durham. Sam, I believe you're back in good old Colorado right now, right?
That is correct. We went on winter break a little over a week ago, so I quickly departed Durham for Colorado. I've been skiing with a bunch of my Fuqua friends out here, seeing some old Denver friends, and I'll be headed back next week. So good to have a little time off, and I'm happy to report that my GPA in business school, at least as of now, is much higher than my GPA in engineering school was.
I'm so proud of you that you're studying and not partying all the time.
Look, we don't have to get into that. I'm just letting you know that my academic performance has been fine to date.
Congratulations. That's wonderful news. And Donald Wine is also a member of the team. Donald, you in DC, or are you traveling for the holidays?
I arrived at my parents' house in Texas yesterday. And so I'm recording live from my room, my old room, which really wasn't my room because I didn't live here when I was in school. But it's always good to be home for the holidays and ready to talk a little basketball because we had some basketball this week.
We did have some basketball this week. And folks, just so you know the rundown of what we're going to have for you, we're going to talk about Texas Tech. We're going to talk about Princeton. We're going to have a little bit of preview of the bowl game coming up. And then we're going to be giving some Christmas gifts. We'll be imparting Christmas gifts upon the Duke Blue Devils. But before we get to any of that, we are going to start with the game against the Texas Tech Red Raiders, a really exciting contest that a lot of people in basketball were eagerly anticipating this week because Texas Tech was undefeated. They were widely considered probably the best defensive team in the country. They're a team that likes to play slowly. And the question was, could they hold the Duke juggernaut offense in check? They did to a large extent. Duke only scored 69 points, but Texas Tech only scored 58. 58-69, the Blue Devils get the victory on a neutral floor in Madison Square Garden. It was a rockin' atmosphere. Everyone said it felt like, a Final Four kind of game. Donald, I will go to you first. Tell me what you take away from this contest, a really important one. A lot of people say this is a preview of what Duke versus Virginia is going to look like this year.
Yeah, and you know what? I think you nailed it with the first thing when you talked about how this game felt. I wouldn't say it felt like a Final Four game, but it definitely felt like an Elite Eight game or a late tournament game of some sort because Texas Tech is a really tough team. And they brought a lot of fans to the Garden. This is normally our home away from home game. But they were talking during the broadcast that Duke wanted to schedule a team that was going to draw some interest late in the year before these guys get off for the holidays. And I thought they had a great draw in Texas Tech, and they had a really good team. We have to begin on our end. We have to begin with number 3, Trey Jones, because I thought he had his best game as a Blue Devil against Texas Tech with his 13 points, his 5 assists, and most importantly, his 6 steals, because those steals all came at opportune times. When we were down, we needed momentum, and he was able to provide that jolt on defense. And even when he didn't steal the ball, he was causing turnovers. He was causing a lot of havoc with his defense. And I thought he had the best output of anybody on the team on both ends of the floor. He was one of the main reasons why we came back after being down for so long in the game. I mean, we weren't down a lot of points, but we were down for a long stretch of the game. He was the catalyst in helping us come back and stay on top and really drive down the stretch. So we have to really comment. I want to
Donald,
make sure that
I love the way you mention how Trey Jones, not just the steals, but that how he was forcing turnovers in other ways. A friend of mine, we were emailing about the game, and he said that Trey was hounding the Texas Tech point guard so much that at one point the guy looked at Trey, and Trey kind of made a stab at the ball, and it wasn't a steal, but he said the Texas Tech point guard just vomited the ball out of bounds,
Right. Yeah.
which I thought was really fun. It was late in the game, and it was like you could sense that he was like looking at Trey like, oh my God, this guy's coming for me. And he just lost the ball out of bounds for no reason other than fear of Trey Jones.
Yeah, and he was doing that a lot too, where, there was a point where Texas Tech was being very efficient on offense, and him just knuckling down and really like doing, like you said, sometimes he would try to jump a passing lane. He wouldn't get the ball, but it would scare them almost into shooting the ball maybe 10 seconds earlier than they wanted to, because they figured that if he was going, then someone else was coming right behind him, and that the what has now become the Duke wave on transition was coming. And so they would jack the ball up and really play the ball into our hands, because we would be able to get the ball and run the floor again. So I think that sort of defensive effort that he put out was incredible, in the sense that he was not able to get 80 steals, but it seemed like every single possession he was involved in making them miss. So I wanted to point that out. There's one stat I want to bring out before I kick it over to Sam. Jack White, he didn't have his best game, but again, he was all over the place. He made differences in areas that the stat sheet doesn't cover, and this is an incredible stat. We were talking last week about offensive and defensive efficiency on KenPom. Jack White is number one in the country among an offensive rating among major conference players. Number one, the best player in the country in offensive rating, according to KenPom, with a 142.9. I think that is something that you're probably like, oh, that was probably going to be Zion. That was probably going to be Barrett. Probably going to be one of these other, really good players. But for Jack White to lead the nation, it shows how underrated he is, because when you look at his stats, they don't notice that. And KenPom is really, I'm glad that he's pointing out that Jack White is a very indispensable part of our offense.
Donald, does that mean that Jack White is sort of the closest thing we have to Shane Battier these days on this team?
Yeah, basically, like, filling up the stat sheet, and even in areas that you can't really compute, he is making a difference for this team on offense. And you know what? Honestly, on defense too, he's getting some good rebounds. He got 5 on Thursday against Texas Tech. He was one of those guys that, again, you get a rebound or he gets an and one, the offense, the momentum just kicks up a notch, and everyone else knows it's time to go. So when he's on, like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get 10 and 12 from him. It means you're probably going to get 4 and 5, but those 4 and 5 are key moments and help spur a comeback or spur a run that the other team just cannot contain.
Donald, I love that you started talking about the defense and specifically about Trey Jones. In the post-game press conference, Coach K said that Trey was the difference in the game, which you clearly agree with Coach K about that. But then K said that his defensive performance, and I quote, was up there with Amaker, Hurley, Wojo, and Duhan. And I think, I feel like I started to go, Trey Jones, we are watching one of the great defensive guards in Duke basketball history. And we're only, 10, 12 games into his career, and you can already see what a huge difference maker he is on defense. I totally agree with Coach K that this guy is probably the best defensive guard we've seen at Duke since Wojo, Duhan, and as a freshman, he may be the best freshman defender ever. I want to talk about a couple defensive things really quick, and then I'm going to kick it over to Sam to talk about the offense. Guys, there were some amazing stats about what Duke has been doing on defense lately. We have now held 5 consecutive teams, 5 straight opponents under 60 points. 60 points. If you can't score 60, you ain't going to win against this Duke team. I don't care how much you slow it down. I don't care how good you are on defense, Texas Tech. You got to get to 60 to have even a chance against Duke, and we've held 5 straight teams under 60. This Texas Tech team,
Jason, we need to hold that comment until Duke plays Virginia in a few weeks.
I hear you, but I'm telling you, you will not. Duke will score 60 points in every game this year. I know Virginia's going to slow it down. I know Virginia's really good on defense. They will not hold us under. I can't see them holding us under 60.
Folks, you heard it here
and
first. Just letting you
there
know.
you go. Bet the over. In the last 6.5 minutes against Texas Tech, they had 3 free throws. They only scored 3 points in the final 6.5. They didn't score at all in the final 2.5 minutes. Texas Tech had 3 fast break points the whole game. 3 fast break points. We don't give up points, easy baskets. We don't give up points in transition, and we're really hard to score against in the half court. That's why teams aren't scoring on us. And here's the best stat. This is like unbelievable. Since we returned from Maui, PFR Duke, one of our fellow moderators on the bulletin boards, PFR Duke pulled out this statistic, and I have to repeat it for everyone who didn't read it. Since we returned from Maui, Duke has played 474 possessions of basketball, 474 possessions on defense, and we've given up 338 points. That is insane. We are giving up 0.71 points per possession. That's so far and away the best in the country. It's not even close. The closest is Texas Tech, that gives up about 0.75 points per possession. But since we returned from Maui, since that Gonzaga game where they scored on us so easily was seared in our memory, since we turned up the defensive pressure, this Duke team gives up 0.71 points per possession. That's just an absurd, crazy number. All right, I'm done with the defense. Sam, talk about the offense, and this was an offensive struggle for Duke against Texas Tech and against the Texas Tech refs.
It did seem like Duke continually was trying to get into an offensive rhythm against Texas Tech, and the thing that was preventing them from doing so throughout the game, as you sort of alluded to, Jason, was the repeated offensive fouls that Duke committed throughout the game. I think by the end there were 7 or 8 of them. Zion Williamson fouled out with like 4 or 5 minutes to go on an offensive foul, and I'm sure that Duke haters the world round were excited to watch a Duke game where Duke was being called for all the charges, because for many years, of course, that was the opposite, as the Blue Devils were so good at taking charges. But in this game, the challenge was that Duke couldn't just drive the ball with abandon the way that they've been able to, especially Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett, the way that they've been able to throughout the season. And what we saw here, I think, even though, Duke's not necessarily going to play a defense as good as Texas Tech, perhaps outside of Virginia the rest of the season, but what we saw here was a little bit of the formula for how to beat Duke by changing the game on them. I think Gonzaga was playing Duke's game and beat them on that night. This night, if Texas Tech was going to win the game, they were going to win it on their terms. And the lesson that I think the Blue Devils are going to take from this is the need to diversify the offense more. Now, the offense is very efficient. It's one of the best in the country. The challenge for Duke is that if they face a team that is strong enough to defend the post and to stand in the way and take charges the way that Texas Tech was willing to do on a number of occasions, the Blue Devils are going to struggle to score, and they're certainly not going to be able to play their brand of offense. I think they need to be more efficient at driving the lane, but then kicking out. There were a few of those plays late in the game. I think that the comeback was highlighted by some of those 3-pointers. Jack White had a couple of them. Cam Reddish had a couple of them. Otherwise, throughout the game, the threes weren't falling. That drive and kick wasn't really working.
Whoa, for Duke. Hey! Cam did not have Cam had one. Duke hit
That's what
three.
I said he had one.
You said he had a couple of them, but
regardless,
the larger point is Duke was not hitting their threes, and you're right. We only hit 16% from 3. But if I can just really quick, so that was about as bad as you can shoot from 3. There was a very real chance that Duke has some absurd streak of 1,000 games or something or other in a row that we've hit at least one 3-pointer. It dates back to before Sam was born or something like that. But
I believe it.
Yeah, but we were in danger of losing that streak. This was as bad as I can imagine us shooting 3-pointers. And we still played a top 10 team, the best defensive team in the country, and we won by 11. This is as bad as we could shoot from the outside, and we still beat a Final Four contender by 11. I think there are good things ahead.
Yeah. Look, I'm picking nits for the sake of picking nits. I'm not doing it because I think that this is a fatal flaw for this team. But it's something that I imagine we will see tweaks in the offense too as we get into conference play, which is coming up next. Amazingly, Duke is all wrapped up with non-conference play, with the exception of that home St. John's game in February.
Donald, I'm going to give you the last word, and I want to talk about free throw shooting. I mean, we were talking about picking nits. We're talking about weaknesses. One of the things that people have consistently said they were concerned about for this Duke team was, are we going to be able to hit free throws in a close, exciting, tense game where we need to hit free throws? And at least this time, the answer looked like it was yes.
Yeah, we went 20 for 25. That's 80% if you're doing the math at home. And that's something that's 12 points above our normal average of 68%. 68% isn't bad, but it's definitely at the end of the game situation. You're taking your chances because teams are going to foul you and hope that you miss at least one. Because down the stretch, that's kind of how that equals out to be. Is you're going to miss 3 or 4. That could be the difference in a close game. But when you're hitting 80% of your free throws, that is a great accomplishment, and that's something that this team should always be striving for when it comes to making free throws, because if they're going to make these free throws down the stretch, then teams aren't going to foul them. And if they foul them, then they're going to say, you know what, we're just giving up 2 points. But one note that I also want to talk about was the fouls. We had 17 fouls against Texas Tech. I want to say that 9 of them were charges. And Sam was talking about how many offensive foul calls were against us. Take the charges out for a second, because I think they were calling a lot of charges on both sides of the floor. I want to say there was probably 20 or 23 charge calls called in this game. But to only have like 8 fouls in the game on defense, that is another testament to how great they were on defense. Usually if you're getting 10, 11 fouls on defense, 12 fouls, 13 fouls, that's not bad. But to have only 8, that is an astounding number. That means that they were playing excellent defense. They were keeping the guys in front of them, and really they were picking their moments and executing perfectly. So shout out to the defense again for that stat, because if you're under 10 fouls in a game, you're doing something right.
So, guys, we're going to move on now to the other game that Duke had this past week against Princeton, a fine intellectual university from New Jersey. The Princeton Tigers came down to Cameron. It's the second game that Duke played against an Ivy League school. And this was a really competitive game for a little while. With 7 minutes left in the first half, Princeton led 18-16. And, you had to be maybe a little bit worried. I mean, this is not a bad Princeton club. It was 18-16, and then Duke closed the game on an 85-32 run. We outscored them 85-32 the rest of the way. The Blue Devils end up more than doubling Princeton, winning 101-50. We are quite the second half team. You guys know that I looked this up. You must have a big lead on Duke, because we are coming for you in the second half. Duke has only been outscored in the second half twice this year. Auburn outscored us by 2. And in fairness, that was a competitive game. That's one of the, 3 or 4 games this year where the outcome has been at least a little bit in doubt. Indiana outscored us by 3. That was a game we were winning by 30 at halftime. But against Princeton, we did what we usually do. We outscored them 62-24. Wow. That is just a beatdown of all beatdowns. Donald, I will go to you first. What are your takeaways from the Blue Devils crushing the Princeton Tigers?
Well, if Thursday was the steal party, Tuesday against Princeton was the block party. We had 14 blocks in that game. And, a lot of including one where I know you guys saw it, Zion hit his head on the backboard absolutely viciously, and they were comparing it to that night LeBron getting blocked on a dunk, and most people said that his block was better. So that
was one of the craziest block shots I've ever said. His hand, you can't even describe how high he got. That was crazy.
He took out another player when he landed, because he went literally from blocking a ball high above the net to being completely parallel to the court and taking out one of his teammates and half of the cheerleaders in the process.
I think they said he lost a tooth, or he badly chipped a tooth.
He lost a tooth on that play, which is, and he
lost a tooth by banging his head against the backboard. Oh my God!
They're going to have to they're going to have to move the baskets for Zion's safety.
Yeah, Baskin knew what he was doing. Yeah, so the block party, 14 blocks. That was really what turned it around for us against Princeton. Against Texas Tech, it was the steals that led to transition buckets. For us against Princeton, it was the blocks. And before the Princeton game, we talk about how Ivy League teams kind of play similar to each other. And I saw a lot of what we saw against Yale early on against Princeton. And Princeton was executing. They were hitting threes. They were, moving the ball around and being very deliberate about the shots they took, and they were making them. They were getting the balls into good positions. They weren't taking terrible shots. And we just kind of had to settle down and get them to take terrible shots. And how we did that was by blocking some of the good shots that they had into another stratosphere. So that was the first step. I loved how we responded. RJ Barrett didn't have the most efficient game, but he was able to get up and down the floor. He was able to make a couple of big buckets in the second half to really start the momentum and start the pull away. He ended up with 27 points. I think he at that time he was the only player since JJ to have 4 consecutive 25-point games. And he was doing it in every way possible. He was dunking. He was taking some long twos. He was taking some short twos. He did make a 3, but just that the pressure that he gives by shooting those threes, knowing that he's able to make them, was able to draw the defense out. And he was able to take that ball the next possession, go in the lane, get an and one, and really change the course of the game. So I really liked what I saw there. Zion again was a freak. 17 and 10, and it's funny. He went 6 for 8, and you're like, why didn't you get the ball more? He just had I think he had to miss a couple minutes when he broke his tooth. He also had that moment where he got elbowed inadvertently. He had to sit out and came back with just some absolute demeanor. But I think those guys, when they are on, they fuel the rest of the team on offense. And you saw that against Princeton in the second half. When Barrett was on, everyone was going nuts. Jack White came off the bench, had 10 points. Alex O'Connell had 10 points. Those sort of guys we're going to need to, produce. We talked about Jack White already. Alex O'Connell from 3-point line, especially when we're having an off night and he can shoot the ball, we're going to be successful. So I really liked what I saw, especially in the second half from our team. But really, it was the blocks that started the momentum that turned everything around for us.
Donald, that was awesome. I don't know how much more I could say about the Princeton game other than the fact that Duke was for those first few minutes, as Jason said, it was sort of neck and neck. And I think we said before that game that perhaps you could chalk that up to them just being off for a while, and maybe that is a warning to Duke that when Clemson comes into Cameron in a couple weeks, that they need to be aware of that. They obviously won't have exams again, but they will have the Christmas break. So I'm sure that Coach K will be on them about not letting a more talented Clemson team, more talented perhaps than Princeton, let them get out to a quick lead, because that's more dangerous when you're playing another ACC squad and perhaps a squad that would have really liked to have Zion Williamson on the team this year, as many pundits expected they would.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add, I agree that the blocks were sort of the story of the game. Marquise Bolden, by the way, 4 block shots in 15 minutes. He is, and the other thing about Bolden, just really quick, because we never really talk about him that much. I think I've noticed he does a great job for a big man, for a rim protector, when he gets switched onto a guard. If you're an opposing team, ideally the way you're going to try and beat this Duke team when Bolden is in the game is you're probably going to try to get him switched onto a guard who can, hopefully take him or get a good shot, a step back shot or something like that. Bolden does such a really, really nice job, keeping his body square and not getting turned around and closing out when he needs to and knowing how to block shots. You can't take advantage of him. And I just thought the defensive effort against Princeton was really great. I mean, we forced them into 19 turnovers. We blocked 14 shots. They couldn't hit it. They hit some stuff early, but in the end, Princeton shot less than 30% from the field, less than 30% from 3-point range. It was yet another great defensive effort by the Blue Devils, and yet another easy, comfortable win. Something we're becoming really, really used to, and something we probably won't see nearly as much now that we're entering ACC season. This episode of the DBR podcast is brought to you, as always, by our fine friends at Bird Campbell. Bird Campbell sent us a message. Tucker Bird did for the holidays. He says, "Happy holidays, everyone. Merry Christmas, peace on earth, goodwill toward all men, but particularly toward those playing for Duke. Go Devils." And so we urge you, please, if you need legal help and you are in Texas or Florida, reach out to Bird Campbell at byrdcampbell.com, birdcampbell.com. Bird Campbell means business. So in the next couple days, the Blue Devil football team will be at it for the final time this season. They will be playing Temple in the, I don't even know what it's called, the Shreveport something or other bowl.
It's the Independence Bowl.
The Independence Bowl. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that.
Independence Bowl.
Yes, sponsored by Walk-Ons.
Yes.
Okay. What are walk-ons? Anyone?
Walk-ons are those guys that come on the team that don't have scholarships and they end up playing.
I knew that, but I mean, they don't have a corporate sponsorship, do they?
Apparently they do, and we're playing in their bowl. So,
Donald, the fact that you knew what a walk-on was, no, we all know what a walk-on is. But Donald, please preview for us what is ahead in this game. Temple has a new football coach, don't they?
They do, and you know what? They're a pretty good team as well. They're 8-4 in the season. They were 7-1 in the American Athletic East Division. Their only loss in the conference came to UCF, which everybody in conference lost to. So there's no harm there. They can score some points. They average 35 points a game during the season, and they have a 1,000-yard rusher in Raquel Armstead. Anthony Russo is a capable quarterback, and so they're a pretty decent team. And seeing them, they're going to be a tough out. What does Duke Gang need to do to beat the Owls in a stadium that is familiar to our coaching staff? Well, there's three things. First, they have to control the line of scrimmage on both offense and defense. That's a given. Doing that on offense will allow our rushing game to take flight and open the game up. And on defense, controlling the line will contain their offensive attack and force 3rd and long situations and hopefully 3-and-out drives. Secondly, they can't give up big plays. We've talked about it our season. Our defense was killed all year by the big play. Because it really takes momentum away and gives it to the other team. Well, we can't do that. With all the injuries that we sustained, we need to limit those plays and really keep the momentum in our court, because I think it really dictates the flow of the game whenever we play. And third, seize the moment. It's a prime opportunity to showcase the Duke team and our program on national TV. Recruits are watching, NFL scouts are watching, America's watching. This is another chance to showcase our guys. And if we can own that moment, we can take it to the Temple Owls and win our last game of the season. And really, honestly, guys, 8-5 is a whole lot better than 7-6. So let's just close out 2018 on the right note.
Yeah, as much as Duke has struggled this year and have suffered from injuries, they could end the season on a positive note. And I think that there's more optimism around this team than there should be more optimism around this team than there is. Just given that most of the season, I think, was derailed by injuries and not by talent. Early in the season, Duke took a really good Army team out behind the woodshed at Wallace Wade Stadium. That's how they opened the season. And Army just went and set a whole bunch of records in their bowl game. scoring a ton of points and looking
70
fantastic
points.
in the process. Yeah. So I think that there's reason to be optimistic about Duke heading into next season. Hopefully Daniel Jones is back for the Blue Devils, and hopefully some of those injuries to key players like Michael Carter are resolved, and Duke gets to redeem themselves next season. So this is the beginning of that. Coach Cut likes to talk about how the bowl game is special, not just because Duke gets another game to play in, but because they get that extra practice, because they get to start thinking about next year. So as much as this game is Duke playing Temple in Shreveport, it's also the beginning of the 2019 campaign for Duke.
Dudes, guess what? I found out what walk-ons is.
Oh,
are you ready?
Wait. Before, is it like pork rinds or something? Because if they are, then I'm going to go buy some.
No, Walk-On's Bistro and Bar is a series of restaurants in the state of Louisiana, founded by a former LSU basketball player who was
Shaquille
a
O'Neal.
walk-on. No, his name was
Shaquille
Brandon Landry. Brandon Landry was a walk-on on the LSU basketball team, and so he founded a series of restaurants called Walk-Ons. And they have a 3-year sponsorship deal with the Independence Bowl, which was once known as the Poland Weed Eater Bowl.
Yep.
It has been the Camping World Bowl, the Duck Commander Bowl, the Petro Sun, and the Advocare Bowl, and now it is the Walk-Ons Bistro and Bar Bowl. Okay.
Independence, but the Independence, but it's always been the Independence.
It's always been the Independence. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. That's true. Yes. So now we know what Walk-Ons is, and I'm sure that any Duke fan going to this game will probably want to check out Walk-Ons Bistro and Bar.
I wonder if they have, how they have some of the team competitions when a food is involved. Like I think the Buffalo Wild Wings used to sponsor a bowl in the Bahamas, and they used to have like a wing off between the teams. I wonder if they're going to go to a Walk-Ons Bistro and Bar and have some sort of whatever off, like gumbo competition or something. That would be interesting to see when they air it, because they always do those during the broadcast. They always show the competitions that they have associated with the bowl games.
I know that at the Outback Bowl they have a mascot that's dressed as the Bloomin' Onion.
Yeah, it's the greatest one. One of the greatest ones in sports.
It's dressed as a Bloomin' Onion. That's great.
It's a person in a Bloomin' Onion suit. So that's really impressive.
Now I know what I'm going to be for next time for Halloween. I'm going to become a Bloomin' Onion. All right, gentlemen, it is the holiday time of year, and even though 2/3 of the podcast team celebrates Hanukkah instead of Christmas, we are going to do Christmas gifts for the Blue Devils. And I want to stress something. These are just stocking stuffers. These are not big, huge gifts. It's not like this team needs Trey Jones to turn into Kyrie Irving or Marquise Bolden to become Sheldon Williams. Put another way, we don't need someone to pull a Shane Battier junior year and suddenly out of nowhere become a huge scorer, or a Zubek senior year and turn into the best offensive rebounder in a generation overnight. These are just small stocking stuffers that this team needs. And by the way, you are not allowed to give the team health. That is an obvious gift. That is the first thing we're putting in the stocking stuffer, that everyone on the team should stay healthy. Everyone, that's an obvious one, and everyone gets to root for that. Everyone wants the team to stay healthy. So other than health, what are your stocking stuffers? Sam, I'll start with you.
So we've been watching this season as Zion Williamson in particular, but also RJ Barrett have sort of taken this team by storm and have been the offensive force. Jason, you've talked about, but Jason and Donald both talked about today about how great Trey Jones has been on defense. I want that fourth freshman. I want Cam Reddish to blossom into the great player that we expected him to be at the beginning of the season. And I know that shooting is one of the things that he could obviously improve on. The thing that I want to give Cam Reddish, though, is smarts in the lane, because he like RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson are both good at going to the rack, and obviously Texas Tech exposed a little bit of that, of the danger of driving too much with the charges. I want to see Cam Reddish be able to take the ball inside and either score confidently, because there are a lot of times where he gets in the paint and it seems like he becomes lost, or be able to kick out efficiently. I think that he's got the size and he's got the agility to be a really great driver, and I want that to come together for him, because that's what's going to make him effective this year at Duke, and then also long term in his NBA career, because at his size, he should be able to do a lot of things on the basketball court.
I like it. And I will be coming back to that when it's time for me to give my gift. But first, Donald, what are you stuffing the Duke stocking with?
So I am giving our team a 72% free throw percentage. Why 72%? Well, right now we're pretty decent. We're at 68%. But 72% is closer to, where a team should be. A team from high school on, they teach you that you want to probably be in the 75 to 80% range as a basketball team shooting free throws, because at that point, nobody's going to stop you. 72% is just below that, but it's going to basically create 2 to 3 more made free throws on average per game. And if you remember, our only loss was by 2 points. That would have been a difference. So I think when we're talking about our team, the one flaw that we've been worried about with regards to our offense is either 3-point shooting or a free throw shooting. Well, I think our free throw shooting, if it comes around, it won't matter, because at the end of the games, that is where championships are made. And if we can get to 72%, I think we're looking at a championship basketball team.
So for my stocking stuffer for the Blue Devils, I'm sort of similar to what Sam brought up. I want to focus on Cam Reddish, but I'm going to go for his outside shooting. We've seen, the past several games, Cam started the year hitting a lot of threes, and it just seemed effortless for him. And the past few games, he's been struggling a lot more. His 3-point percentage is down to about 35% now. So my stocking stuffer is, for the rest of the season, Cam Reddish will hit 40% or better of his 3-pointers. I think if Cam is hitting, 2 out of every 5 3-pointers he takes, this Blue Devil team will win. If not every single remaining game, they will win pretty much every remaining game, and they will win a national title. Cam Reddish, getting a little more from the outside, from long range, is really the only thing I see this team missing, because they've become such a great defensive team. They are so good taking the ball to the basket with RJ and Zion. So if we can balance that with some outside shooting, I am gifting the team a 40% 3-point shot from Cam Reddish, and as a result, I think I'm gifting them a national title. Guys, it's time for our Player of the Week picks. We are getting ready to wrap things up. Player of the Week, parting shot. That's what we got coming up. So we will start with Player of the Week. And Sam, I will begin with you. Who takes the honor?
The big game this week was Duke's game against Texas Tech. So with apologies to all the production that we saw against Princeton, I'm going to focus on the Texas Tech game. And I don't think you can say Duke wins the Texas Tech game without the contribution of Trey Jones. As Donald talked about extensively when we were recapping that game, both sides of the ball, where he was distributing on offense, but in particular on defense, where he was just harassing Texas Tech outside the arc, not allowing them to get into their offense, especially down the stretch. My Player of the Week is Trey Jones.
It's a great choice, and I want to give you a great Trey Jones stat. So Trey had 13.6 rebounds, 6 steals, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. It is only the 15th time in Duke history, only 15 times in Duke history has someone had a 10-5-5-5 game. 10 plus points, 5 plus steals, 5 plus rebounds, 5 plus assists. The other players to do that, it's like a who's who of the greats. I mean, like Dunleavy, Duhan, Justice Winslow, Grayson Allen, Wojo, Leitner, Ferry, Johnny Dawkins, Kenny Denard, friend of the podcast. Kenny Denard has done it. Grant Hill did it twice. But for Trey Jones to be in that company with those guys, really impressive. But he's not my Player of the Week. I'm not going to reveal my Player of the Week until after Donald tells us his Player of the Week.
Well, it's going to be at least 2 for 2 until you name your Player of the Week, because I'm also going with Trey Jones for everything that Sam said. 11 assists on the week, 6 steals against Texas Tech, really the big key there. 1 turnover. And we were shocked at that turnover because he rarely turns the ball over, it seems, these days. So, but for the defensive end effort that he gave against Texas Tech, that was why I'm giving it to him. So, Trey Jones, tip of the cap to you.
So for my player of the week, I'm not picking Trey Jones, as great as he was. I'm going with Zion Williamson because there was a moment. I mean, Zion had a great week. He's putting up double doubles like they every single time he steps on the floor. It seems like he's putting up a double double. But there was a moment against Texas Tech with 12 minutes left in the game. We were down 5 points at the time, and it felt like all the energy was on their side of the ball. It just felt, I thought the game was going to start to get away from us. We'd been down most of the game. And like I said, we're down 5 and we had an offensive possession. We took a shot and Zion went insane beast mode on the offensive glass. It was like no one is getting this ball but me. And he got 3 consecutive rebounds where he just wanted it way, 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 way more than anyone else. And he ended up getting fouled, and the whole team, you saw the bench get up. Everyone it lifted the entire team's spirits. And for a guy to do that single-handedly, we see him do it all the time. He is a phenom. He's a force of nature. After the game, all anyone could talk about was whether or not he's going to be playing 41 games in the Garden next year for the Knicks. I mean, the New York papers are just, they're absolutely going gaga over the possibility that they have a 20% chance of winning the lottery or something like that and getting this guy. He's unreal. And he had a great week. As great as Trey Jones was, I thought Zion's week was a little more consistent. And it's just, so my player of the week is Zion Williamson.
Jason, I love that you brought up that moment in the game because it was right around then with about 12 minutes left in the game where Duke started to come back. They were, like you said, they were down about 5 points. I think it was with when they were down 3 points with about 11 minutes left. I turned to my friend who I was watching the game with and I said, as much as Duke has struggled today, doesn't this feel like one of those games where Duke is going to win by 10 or 12 points? And sure enough, the Blue Devils rode that little momentum shift right into an 11-point win that wasn't really competitive for, the last 2 minutes of the game. It felt, eventually it became inevitable, but this was a neat turnaround from what we've seen from Duke teams in years past, where they're up by a few points with like 5-6 minutes left. And it's like, oh gosh, now they have to hold on. This team, it doesn't feel like that. And Jason, you mentioned it with the, with Duke's ability to hold on in the second half. This is kind of a new phenomenon for Duke. It's great fun. I love it.
I was going to give an honorable mention to Zion Williams' tooth in memoriam.
Our tooth of the week goes to the tooth that Zion Williamson lost on the Duke backboard. All right, guys, it's time for parting shots. Donald, I'm going to let you tee us off. Get going first. What is your parting shot?
Okay, guys. So I was watching basketball on Friday night, packing up to come down here to Texas to visit my parents. And I ended up stumbling upon a video game on TV. And that video game was Marcus Howard and Marquette. I don't know if you guys saw this game that they had against Buffalo on Friday night, but Marcus Howard, who plays for Marquette, Wojo, our boy Wojo, coaches there. He had 5 points at the end of the first half, and by all accounts, was having a pretty terrible game for Marquette. He's one of their best players. He's their point guard. He's their scoring. In the second half, he apparently had something said to him right before the second half started by Wojciechowski. And Wojo, I don't know what he told him, but it worked because Marcus Howard went on to score 40 points in the second half, literally missing maybe 2 shots the entire half. And I'm talking anything from layups to 30-foot threes, fall away, being contested by 2 guys. He was hitting everything. It was incredible to see him just go off like that. And every single, you could not help but get captivated by every single time he came down the floor with the ball to see what he was going to do. Marquette ended up beating Buffalo 103-85, but he scored at one point 17 straight points for Marquette down the stretch, and was just literally every time they had a possession, it seemed like he got the ball and hit a three or had an and one or some shot that was just absolutely ridiculous to watch. But it was his second 45-point output of the season. He had one against Kansas State, another game that Marquette won. Look for Marquette to really make some noise in the Big East this year. They may be the Big East best team, and it's because Marcus Howard decided he was going to play like a video game. So shout out to him.
Donald, I know that you didn't look at the messages that we send each other before the game, because I had said that my parting shot was going to be Mark. It's okay. My parting shot was going to be a combination of Marquette and Arizona State. So I'm doing my parting shot now, and rather than talking about Marquette, I'm going to talk about Arizona State, because the other prominent Duke Coach K protege out there is Bobby Hurley. And Arizona State may have established themselves as the best team in the Pac-12, which isn't saying that much. The Pac-12 may only get one or two bids to the tournament. The Pac-12 is just awful. But Arizona State looks like the best team in the Pac-12. They beat Kansas this week at home. Now, look, Arizona State, they're only number 43 in Ken Pomeroy and in the net. But beating Kansas is a resume-making kind of win. Last year, folks, you probably recall the Arizona State Sun Devils, Bobby Hurley's team, started out really strong. They were one of the last undefeated teams in the country. They were ranked in the top 5 at one point, and they really faded late in the season. They only made the tournament as a number 11 seed. They played in the play-in game. I think they lost. Hopefully this season won't be the same way. Hopefully they can build on where they are right now. I think it's fairly likely that they will be ranked, or at least come close to being ranked in the next voting in the poll. But my parting shot is a tip of the hat to both Wojo and Bobby for big wins. I know you talked about Marcus Howard, but for that Marquette win, to me, the significant thing is beating that Buffalo club. Buffalo is for real. Mm-hmm. Buffalo had won at West Virginia and at Syracuse. You probably won't find two road wins by any team as good as at West Virginia and at Syracuse at this point in the season. And that's what Buffalo had done. They were number 11 in the net. They are a top 25 Ken Pom team. And for Marquette to take them down, very impressive. So my parting shot, thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Wojo, for bringing us some good stuff to the Duke coaching tree this year.
And Jason, do you know what Bobby actually might have given Duke? He might have given us a number 1 ranking entering Christmas. So thanks, Bobby.
I love it. Sam, you are up. Final parting shot time. Tell me what you got.
I'm going to do a continuation from my previous parting shot. I told you guys about my friend, the big new Duke fan. She texted me late after the Texas Tech game to tell me that she was on YouTube watching highlights from the Duke Maryland 2001 game. And I said this to you guys previously, but for everybody else's knowledge, I said, which one? Is it the Miracle Minute? Is it the comeback in the Final Four? There were a lot of good games between Duke and Maryland in 2001. So she clarified it was the Miracle Minute, and all she had to say was, wow. Duke fans, if you are relatively new to watching the program and you don't know much about Duke's history, I know that we've talked in the past about trying to educate me on basketball from the 70s and 80s. Go back and watch Duke's comeback against Maryland in 2001 in Cole Fieldhouse. That's a great one and should not be missed.
You call it the Miracle Minute. All the rest of us, I'm surprised. All the rest of us merely know it as gone in 54 seconds. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Look, their lead,
it's good enough to have.
They had a big lead, and it was, yeah. They had a big lead, and that lead was gone in 54 seconds.
Spoiler alert.
Still just, yeah, right. Yeah, if you're a Duke fan, go watch one of these games we lost. No, this is a game we ended up winning, and a very, very fun one.
Well, the thing why we call it Gone in 54 is because of the movie that had just come out like 3 months prior, Gone in 60 Seconds. It fell in perfectly.
Exactly. Well, that is going to do it here on the DBR podcast, the Christmas edition, episode number 139. We had a very, very fun time talking about the Blue Devils' victories over Texas Tech and Princeton. Folks, we'll be back right around New Year. We'll recap the football bowl game that's coming up. We'll also be doing a special ACC season preview where we will be talking about surprises from the ACC and what we expect from the ACC as the season is ready to launch. The real season is ready to launch in just about a week or so. Until then, for Sam in Denver, for Donald in Texas, I am Jason in Atlanta. Duke Band, take us home.